Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is a classically trained singer from the UK. She's actually in my community, which is pretty cool. So this is a nice change of things. Her name is Lydia Pearson. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Doing very well. Thank you. It's finally started to rain. So now I feel like I'm not dying anymore.
Cooling down.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I'm melting.
It's really sticky as well. Like it's close. I find it quite unpleasant.
I just can't handle it. I don't know. I've got like fair skin and I get like intense sunstroke and stuff like that.
Oh, wow. That's never good. That's never good.
I just hide in the summer, to be honest. Everyone else is like, oh, why don't you like it? It's great. I'm like, nah.
Sun's out, guns out, kind of, no.
Right now, it's perfect for me. It's about 16 degrees. It's raining. This is perfect. I love this. This is perfect weather.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's great. It's very pleasant. And I like the sound of rain. I find it really relaxing. And I find I get into quite a good headspace with it.
I like it. There's someone in one of my lives the other day said that it's quite romantic, and I tend to agree. But it's not just that. I quite like just this whole concept of sitting inside and like just hearing the rain splatter on the windowsill.
Yeah, good book.
Yeah, that works too. Yeah. I like it in winter as well. The same sort of thing, but with, I don't know, with snow or just being inside and warm while it's cold outside. I quite dig that. I think that's nice.
Yeah, you got the right idea. 100%. And listening to music, stick on something nice with the rain, cozy up.
There you go. I want to take it right back to the beginning because I've got quite a few questions for you that I sort of devised in my initial research, and I've also obviously got questions from my Discord community. For those who are unfamiliar, I have a Discord community. It's predominantly filled. It would be helpful if I could speak on my own podcast, wouldn't it? I don't know. I guess I've been out of practice for the past week or 2 weeks, however long it's been.
It's a very varied community, actually. Lots of different people and lots of different sort of contributions, and I love that. I'm learning new things and I'm seeing new things, and it's a fun place to be. Actually, highly recommend to all of you out there who aren't part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it started as just being a kind of a wing off the side of what I do. You know, obviously I do a lot of marketing and branding for everything I do online.
Yeah,
and it kind of seemed like the natural kind of I don't know how to put it. If you're
natural end point, like a natural point on the timeline.
If you're trying to build a community online, then it's very important to have a Discord community, I feel. And you know, I've been building a lot of things over the past year with Patreon and TikTok and countless other different social media sites. And Discord has been interesting because I'd say in the past 6 months or so, it's finally started to become what I wanted it to become, which is just not just a depository for everything that I do, but also an actual community where people can talk and get to know each other and, you know, interact with me as well, which is something I don't often talk about, but it is a place that people can do that more directly. Obviously, we do things like voice chats and
the movie nights
and all these different things. I realize this is just one giant advertisement for my Discord community. I will get to the point.
No, I think advertise the hell out of it. It's great fun, and I've met some amazing people on there. And I think we kind of don't allow in assholes.
This is true.
Everyone there is a nice person and a good person, and that I think that's a very important thing within a community.
And this brings me full circle, which is that I actually received a bunch of questions from the Discord community, and it's something that I've been opening up every time I get a new guest for the podcast. I obviously ask the community, hey, what kind of questions do you want to ask the latest guest? And I've been actually receiving a lot of feedback. So if you do want to join the Discord community and you want to be involved in the types of questions that are asked to the podcast guests, join the Discord community and go to the chat and you'll find that. Yeah. So one of the questions, which I already had down anyway, but it brings us straight into talking about your music career, is when did you actually realize that you had this kind of powerful voice? Because it's always interesting to understand like when people realize such things. Like people often tell me that I have a good singing voice. I can tell you straight away now, it was always terrible in the very beginning, dreadful. And I would say the vast majority of singers have to practice very hard for many, many years. I'd say I've been working on my voice the better part of 10 years or so. And I think finally now it's getting to a point where it's okay. But you have a voice.
You undersell yourself.
No, I'm just being honest. But with your voice, it's very different, because I feel like this is the sort of thing that it's one thing to have like a natural singing voice and be able to just sing general kind of stuff, right? But your voice is, you're opened up to all these different kind of ranges as far as like falsettos are concerned. I mean, it's a different level of singing almost. Anyone that sings in opera, classical singing, whatever, like that, it's a whole other world. And you're doing a lot more powerful stuff with your voice, stuff that the average everyday person can't do. Like I could never sing the way that you sing. And I know that. That's not me trying to be negative or anything. That's just realism, because it's a different level. It's a different world entirely. So bringing it back to you, what was that initial point? Where did it start for you?
God, I remember being very young and we'd drive in a car and they'd have Frank Sinatra, Elton John in the CD deck, and I'd sing everything an octave higher. And my mum at one point turned to me and said, I should get you singing lessons. And I was very, very shy as a kid. I was bullied a lot. I didn't want to be in front of people. I didn't want that focus. I wanted to just blend in. So I went and had these lessons, and I found myself having an avenue or just a way of expressing pain. And there was a lot happening in my personal life at home, and there was a lot happening at school. And the one thing I had was expressing myself through music and having very inspirational music teachers. And obviously teachers are really, really vital in helping people find their passion. So on top of that, my mum has, since I was 7, worked for an opera. So I was surrounded by people at the top of their game from a very young age. And I listened to them because they'd stay here because we're closer to the theatre. So they'd, instead of traveling up and down to London every night, they'd stay in one of our rooms. And I'd hear them doing their warm-ups, and I'd just be like, wow, I want to be that good. I want to be that good. I'm not there now. I'm not as good as them. But it's always kind of informed a sort of competitiveness within me to be as good as them. And it's quite exhausting sometimes because like there's this perfectionism thing. But as a kid, I'd say I discovered that and had singing lessons at around 10 or 11. And what they do is they put you doing sort of show tunes. And I was in the choir, and then I was head of choir at one school, and it was just my outlet. And I don't know, it's part of me. I couldn't survive without it. But I think that the best art often is an expression of pain in many different things, like actual paintings and music and writing. You know, I think it's a good thing. I think it keeps people strong, is having an outlet.
There's a lot to unpack here.
I apologize. I go off on tangents.
No, that's fine. No need for apologies. Just gives me more to work with.
I'm a talker.
Yeah, that's fine as well. Again, it's good for podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was going to circle back to this, but you know, you seem to have touched on it quite strongly. So it seems like it's quite important for you, which I understand. I do a similar thing with my music. As far as you mentioned that, you know, you had some struggles there. You mm-hmm. saw it as kind of a means to dealing with the pain in your life. You know, music is a form of escapism, essentially. So with that in mind, I mean, talk us through exactly what was, you know, I mean, you obviously don't have to go into specifics as far as like bullying is concerned, but hey, I'll just say this now. Everyone gets bullied. I got bullied, you know, quite badly. It does happen, but
I think the most interesting people have often been bullied.
No, it's true.
Yeah, because they were different from a young age. So I don't know why I was bullied, really. I grew up in France, and they might have picked up on, I used to have a bit of an accent. So it might have been that. I remember getting called frog a lot, but I didn't really care. But I had an abusive member of my family who was struggling with a drug problem. And that was expressed through their fists into my face a lot when I was very young. And I didn't understand, because I don't know about you, but I didn't know anything about drugs really when I was 10. But kids today are very different and very much more informed. I had absolutely no idea, especially on the sort of side effects and the impact on people. So I just kind of thought, wow, this person really hates me. You know, I didn't understand why they hated me so much, but it's just that I was the younger sibling and easy target, I guess. We still are patching things up 20 years later. It hasn't been completely resolved, but we're getting there. But yeah, that was God. I think that's the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with, was dealing with people not being very pleasant to me at school, and then coming home and sort of, I became very insular and very closed off. And it's taken so much work for me to be able to be vulnerable. And something happened, something clicked, and I went, I don't have to do any of that if I can show it through my voice. If I can show people real emotion and allow them to be sort of part of the story, they should work it out themselves. And I think that's a very powerful thing. Allow, you know, people, when people can actually express emotion, because a lot of people say, you know, sound sad or something, and they'll go, ooh, but actually physically really feeling it, it can be quite intense, getting to that place. But I couldn't have survived without it. No way. But there was when I was in my teens, at school, people used to send me things on Outlook, which rather dates this. And it would say like, good luck, I'll be watching you, I'm always watching you, I think of you in a sort of weird way. And I was just like, okay.
Was this like stalkers?
It was school bullies.
Okay.
Generally in the years above me. And I always thought, God, that's, you know, I understand from people within my own year group, but you know, when it's older kids who don't know you, I remember being like, oh, so people talk, and you know, I didn't feel very comfortable with that. So that all got dealt with rather badly by the school. But
surprise.
yeah. But I did a concert that night. And I sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I think, which is already such a sad song. But they were sitting sort of 7 rows back. I couldn't tell you. And they were just glaring at me. And I had a real moment about 3 years ago. I sang at a wedding, and one of these people who was in the year above me at school was there. And I was just like, I've been hired, I've been paid to sing at this thing. I felt so strong. I was just like, yes, victory, justice, all you sodding people who made my life hell when I was a teenager. It was beautiful. I was just like, yes. And they looked at me as if to say, like, is that her?
Yeah.
The name sounds familiar, but I'm not sure. And I was just like, yeah, it's me.
So they did approach you then? They came up to you and
I'd been invited to the after party, as you know, which is generally done. And I sort of looked at them like, hi, you know, and they just walked straight past me. And I was like, ooh.
Did they look embarrassed at all?
Yeah, I think so. Because, you know, if you're that, I don't know, I never bullied anyone, but you must grow up and be like, God, who was I?
How did they look? Because, and I know this might sound like a strange question, but when I think about the people that bullied me at school, right, I had an interesting situation because the people that bullied me originally were my friends, and it kind of just, it kind of turned into that, and then it became just ruthless. But I always, when I look back, the only thing I can think is that they were jealous. Of what, I'm not entirely sure, but they were jealous of something. And when I look at their lives now, one of them is just the same, like they haven't changed. It's actually kind of depressing. And then the other one is, I don't know, like they didn't really do much with their life, but I guess they're like, they've grown up or whatever. But my point is, they're both kind of like that's all they would ever amount to, kind of thing, because of their negative minds, because of like who they are, what they represent, blah 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 blah. You know, maybe they just lack ambition. I don't know. Maybe because often they say with bullies, you know, obviously the people we deal with online, they're always nameless, faceless people. They're always toxic people. They're just trying to make themselves feel better by bringing you down. So with that in mind, how did this person look like physically?
Pretty much the same. They don't have to worry because they come from a very rich background, all these kids I went to school with, and they don't have to worry about work and stuff like that. So they don't have to worry about being ambitious. They can just, they stayed within their same friend circles. It's happened throughout my year and their year. They haven't really truly expanded their circle, which I think is pretty sad. You know, get out there a bit.
It's interesting that you bring this up. So what I was going to ask you before is there maybe a jealousy angle to this? And I'm almost confident that it must be that now, because, I mean, do you know what these people do for a living now? Do you happen to know?
I couldn't tell you. They're probably in like PR or something. I don't know.
Boring. Okay, yeah.
Like an easy, I couldn't tell you. But one of them did a carpentry degree, which I think is pretty cool. Pretty different for what I was expecting. But yeah, I have no real interest. I've kept a few friends, of course, from school.
Yeah, no. But, I know.
You know, but you know what it's like. You know, a lot of people go to uni and think, I'm going to stay friends with these people forever, and you don't. It's the same with school. You know, I've kept in touch with possibly 2 people from each of my educational institutions.
The people that I've kept on Facebook are like, by the way, anyone listening to this who was a school friend of mine, if I have you on Facebook, that guess what, that means I actually liked you, so well done.
Hey, you've passed the test.
Yeah, well, no, it is kind of like that, you know what I mean?
Cull.
Like, yeah,
everyone needs a good cull every now and then, I think.
You know what's funny? So one of the people that bullied me, right, it's kind of funny. So one of the people that bullied me is now dating, and has been for a very long time, dating a person that I was friends with outside of school for many years. And now it's funny the way that the universe works, right? Because this person who bullied me, right, they used to take the mickey out of this person, this friend of mine. They used to say horrible things about them physically, right? So it's just the most amazing irony that now they're dating and are happy and in love. And I'm like, man, like, if you only knew what this person used to say about you, it's just nuts.
Well,
I mean, I guess
unfortunately, my bullies are all fucking beautiful and modelly, you know, like
it doesn't matter
win on that
about
front.
that. It doesn't matter about that sort of stuff. That's not my point. My point is more that, like, it's funny how these things work out, because out of the two of them, again, like the one that hasn't changed is just a really not very pleasant human being at all. He wasn't then, he isn't now. If anything, it sounds like he's gotten worse. But the other one, I think maybe has grown up, has changed. I don't know. Maybe that's why they're now dating that person. But yeah, but bullies are interesting. I mean, to me, it sounds like your bullies were just jealous because they didn't have any definable kind of talent of their own. So they picked on someone else.
A flautist. I used to play the flute. And I stopped when I realized that I hate saying this kind of thing, I sound like such a cocky person, but quite a natural gift. I hate saying that, oh my god. With voice, you know, it kind of slowed down the flute, and now sort of 20 years later I'm thinking I might take it up again, you know. That's I need to keep busy, or I get quite restless and bored. But yeah, I think bullies, they always used to make fun of me with my flute as well, because of American Pie. There's a line in that about a flute.
Okay.
Yeah, and
inspired comedy, I guess.
Hilarious. But when I was 11 or something, I thought, this is so embarrassing. You know, I didn't have the same strength that I have today back then. I was genuinely most of the time pretty upset and pretty bitter, and I always had my headphones in. I never talked to anyone, because I just thought, if I don't talk to them, they can't talk to me and say something mean. So I had a sort of like, I was at boarding school as well, so I couldn't run home to mum and dad and sort of have a cry, get my stuff together and get up and go the next day with a clean slate. It was pretty relentless, actually. If you're being bullied at a boarding school, it feels completely inescapable. And, you know, I had my own stuff going on at home, obviously, but I craved getting out of there. And my, you know, that it's a slightly different experience, not being able to talk to someone like a parent or a sibling. So you have to get pretty strong. And I struggled with that for a really long time. I couldn't find my strength. And then I stopped caring. I stopped taking things to heart so much. And yeah, that's one thing that, so when there's a troll, I do take it quite personally, because it feels like I'm 12 again, you know, or something like that. It immediately transports me back to that quite unpleasant, let's say, time. So I'm quite, I find myself still quite a sensitive person.
How did you learn to overcome it and battle it?
It sounds bizarre, but I have to really like talk myself through it. I'll read the comment a few times, and sometimes I write it down, and then I'll go through like a checklist in my head of like, well, that's not true, that's complete baloney, you know, like I literally have to tell myself that isn't true, that isn't true. And I don't think that whole delete and block thing actually works, because it's still in you.
Yeah.
I don't generally get a lot of troll comments.
You're lucky. That's all I can say.
I think if I ever go like live, I think I will, because people will say stuff about my weight or something. I don't know. You know, I'm fully anticipating that will happen, but I'm going to be ready. But it's a new thing. I as I've said so many times during your lives, like, I wouldn't have had the balls to say half of the things that to strangers that people do. It's such a different culture now.
Yeah, but there's it's not like real life though. There's no accountability. You can just easily just type it and just leave. That's it.
But I didn't have any apps or anything like that. We had Facebook, and there everyone can see your name. And that would have been sort of 2006 or something. I think Facebook entered my life. But no, it's quite new for me, this whole live video phenomenon. Like that isn't something that I grew up with. So I'm always quite shocked by people who post such hateful words, you know, especially when they're obviously just doing it to get a rise out of people. I often think when it's someone on a live, I'm not talking about yours or in particular, but just in general, if it's constructive and they're saying like, oh, I think that's an E minor chord, mate, you know, something like that, brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
But if it's like, you look like Jabba the Hutt or something, you know, I just think, how do you get off on this?
The worst comment I ever got, it wasn't even that bad as far as like what I normally get, but just listen and you'll see what I mean. So someone commented on a song cover that I did on TikTok one time and said, "You are distinctly average. Good luck." And I was like, damn, I would have just preferred if you'd have called me shit. That was average. Yeah, that
hurts. That would hurt.
It's basically just like saying, yeah, this is, you'll never get anywhere with this, my friend. Just give up now. I was like, damn.
Painfully bad. It was one of mine.
Yeah, but that's obviously not true with you.
And I was doing, because for me, this whole TikTok thing is so new, because I sing Mozart. I sing like very different music. And trying out, let's call it more popular music, although not all of it.
Contemporary music.
More contemporary music is a big change for me. And the only reason I ever really did it is because my granny, when she died, she said, you should really try doing something more modern as well, like branching out. And she was like, you should sing Adele. She was like, you should
stop living Adele. In the past, woman. Stop living in the past, Lydia.
Stop living in 1772. Yeah. She said, you should try singing Adele. And I was like, no, I don't want to. And I still haven't. But yeah, I think
you just don't like modern music then, or what's the deal?
I'm not that into generally the stuff that is trending on TikTok. I like a lot of music. It's rare that I find music from the noughties that I enjoy. I'm happy with sort of 90s and back. You know, like my favorite, my Muse and Radiohead. That's what I grew up with, and anything before that. But I like loads of different things. So. Yeah. But you know, it's no one has bad music taste is my thing. I don't think it's possible to have bad music taste. I think you can just not listen to the right stuff, or well, how can I put this? Like you can just be quite limited. I think a good music taste is someone who listens to a lot of different things. And I get into a lot of little debates with my partner, because he likes death metal. So I'll be listening to like the Verdi Requiem, and upstairs I'll hear like, and I'm just like, you have quite a limited taste in music. And he was like, no, I don't. I like doom metal, I like thrash metal, I like death metal, and I like prog rock. And I was like, wow, yeah, okay, you've got a really limited taste.
I disagree with you. I think, because all those that you just, like, I grew up with metal and rock music, right? And I have to say, all of those different types of metal are vastly different. They're vastly different. You can't compare, say, death metal to thrash metal or symphonic metal. They are like different types of music, you know, in the same way that,
really
like,
know any music by Britney Spears. Like, he has no any other knowledge of anything, and I admire it, to be honest. I think good for you. You know, be you. You do you.
Yeah.
And I love that about them. But my biggest thing I love is soundtracks. Really. And I was thinking about it the other day, because you did that Godfather thing.
Yeah.
And there's a piece, so in the Godfather Part 3, they're at the opera, and I love listening to that opera. It's a good one. And my Italian cousin told me off because I was saying it incorrectly. It's called Cavalleria Rusticana, and it's beautiful. And there's this amazing recording with Pavarotti, and you listen to it and you just think of the Godfather, which is really lovely. And I think having good, solid classical music in movies is really important for people who are like, I hate classical music, you know, and you're just like, well, actually, you like the Harry Potter soundtrack, so you therefore kind of like classical music. You know, I think it's becoming cooler, but back in the day, you're kind of seen as a bit of a dweeb, I think, if you like. I used to make fun of my dad when I was a kid, because he actually really likes Gregorian chants. I'm surrounded by people who love classical music, and I heard it and I'd just be like, oh yeah, this is boring, oh yeah, this is great. And he'd just be like, you don't get it, you just don't get it. And I just, get the emo French. But actually now I can understand where he's coming from. It's still not my cup, you know. I had a music teacher who used to say, it's not my piece of cake. He was Macedonian, and he always mixed up colloquialisms and stuff like that, and it was just so pure. So I still think, it's not really my piece of cake. And actually, I think I'll have to talk about my music teachers actually at some point, because they honestly, they were fantastic for me.
Let's talk about it now. I mean, because one of the questions I actually received was, were you self-taught or did you work with a vocal coach? It's quite clear that you've worked with vocal coaches. So talk us through that. I have worked
with many vocal coaches. So obviously you have music class, and they were all amazing, inspirational friends, really, because I was so lonely. I was being bullied, and they all picked up on that. I think that this artistic part of them picked up on someone who was in a bit of trouble, who and they just sort of went, I should be friendly, and I should look after this person. And they were very encouraging, and they always gave me opportunities. And honestly, I think that I'd be a different person without them having been in my life. So I owe these people so much, and they're so underappreciated. And I don't know if they ever hear this. Thank you so much to Mr. Godfrey and Mr. Patterson. You were amazing. But my vocal coaches, I have had about 6, and they all gave me different styles of things. Because of my mum's background in opera, I went in knowing pieces, and knowing them by ear. So I could generally tackle anything within reason for like a 14, 15-year-old. I wasn't about to go singing some insanely difficult thing, but the more accessible, easy beginner stuff, that is accessible for a beginner. And I remember doing one of the first classical pieces I did was a Mozart piece from The Marriage of Figaro. And my mum and dad know that inside out. They know every little nook and cranny of that entire score. They're very musical people. And I came and I sang it to them and they said, you should keep doing this. And one of the first times I'd ever heard them say that they were proud of me. And that, obviously, when you're growing up, it's a pretty big deal. And I felt quite, sorry if they hear this, I felt quite neglected by them a lot because of stuff going on at home, and I was never really helped through it. I had to learn to deal with it by myself, and I didn't know how. So, for them to actually show up to concerts and listen to me singing, it was addictive because I was like, they're actually part of my life. They're here. My dad worked abroad for most of my life. So for him to make the effort to come on a Friday night to come to one of my concerts, I'd always be like, yay, Dad's here, because he lived in Spain and America and France. So that was always really special. But the vocal coaches, they've all taught me something different, and God, they're amazing people because they just somehow give me this feeling of when I leave after my session, I could bounce off the walls. They bring something out in me, a real energy, and I have a lot to thank them for. But I was properly trained. I haven't just woken up one day and gone, and suddenly like angels descend or something. I don't know what these people think, but I it's taken a lot of hard work, as things do. You got to work hard.
How long does it take to train your voice if you're doing classical?
It took me the best part of about 8 or 9 years to sound how I wanted to sound.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. To a point where I was satisfied.
So what do the exercises involve exactly, or the lessons?
A lot of lip trilling. I bet I'm not going to be able to do it now. So like that thing. And then you do occasionally, because I used to have problems where I kept moving my hands. So one of my teachers devised this thing where like I do a lot of like weird movements and it kind of chills out my hands. And there's a lot of spoken word. I'm going to stop moving because it changes the light. So there's a lot of spoken word exercises as well. So sort of tongue twisters and vowel, like everything really. It takes a full warm up would take me about 15 minutes. So a lot of people I've noticed who don't do that, they'll just do a scale and then hey presto, they're ready to go. Wow. But actually what they don't realize is hopefully they'll stop, because that could actually really damage. You need to, it's like running the 100 meters. I don't know anything about running, I'm the laziest, but it's like, I suppose, running the 100 meters without warming up. Your body needs to be ready. And it's not just, I can hit that note. It's so much more than that, because you want every note to sound beautiful. And for me it's a whole body experience, because I'm constantly trying not to move my hands, so I've got to focus on that. I've got to focus on a foreign language, so a lot of brain power, and often languages I don't know. It's a full-on process. And also, if you're being paid, you well, for me certainly, because I'm an anxious person. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I have a few mental health issues, and I can get a bit shaky. So another part of it is not looking like a tree in the wind. You've got to keep rooted and keep as still as possible and not look like you're panicking, because if it's like they can smell my fear. There's a lot to think about, while it has to be completely natural and it's so quick that it has to just be normal. And that was a lot of my singing lessons actually when I was growing up, were just how to stand and how to breathe. I had whole lessons on breathing, where often dudes would like press my stomach and my diaphragm, and I'd be like, hey ho. There's a lot of stuff behind it, and I get a bit worried when I see people who aren't, you see people on telly, and I'm not talking about people on TikTok because I think they know what they're doing, but people on the X Factor or something like that, who they're not doing it properly, and they sound, some of them, yes, they sound great, but you're like, I can tell that you're breathing from here and not your diaphragm, and you're just like, well, that's not going to last long. You're going to damage yourself.
You mentioned X Factor. Can you give any examples of anyone we might know like that's doing it wrong?
Let me think. I think I can say I think Leona Lewis is good.
Mm-hmm.
She's got she had a good voice. I'm not sure about her now. Who was on the X Factor? God.
It was that Susan Boyle. She was quite
Subo. Again, I think she's probably got a good technique. I'd need to rewatch, to be honest, because it's been a while. But I did think, okay, here's an example of a thing. So when I was growing up, I had a rival. A rival, and she was this. Oh God, she looked like Catherine Zeta-Jones as well.
All right.
I kind of hated her a bit, but she was so nice, and she was Greek and German, and she was beautiful, and she had this. She turned up at sort of 15 years old, sounding like a 40-year-old opera singer.
Wow.
And I was just like, I've got no chance in hell here. I'm never, because I went through a phase of being like the go-to, and I loved it. It was very good for my ego, because I'd had a few years of not having a very good ego. So when she turned up, I was like, shit, okay. And I went home to my mum on a weekend break, and I said, there's this girl, Mum, and she sounds like a professional. She sounds like she's sort of at your level with your people. And she was like, yeah, but people shouldn't sound that way when they're that young. It's like, actually, I can tell, like, fully developed voices when you're that young means that they're overdoing it.
Oh,
when you see those kids, I can give you an example. Actually, there was a kid on the X Factor who went on and sang Madam Butterfly, I think. She went on, and it's very, very, I haven't even done that, I haven't. My teachers have said, I'm not sure, I'll give it to you when you're ready. And they have this 7-year-old child or something, and I highly disapprove. And they're putting their voices through unnecessary strain. And I'm not saying they don't sound good, but when you're that young, you need everything to develop at a proper rate, I think. And sort of overdoing it.
How long do you need to wait before you can kind of start beginning to sing at that level?
I think it's irresponsible of a teacher to give a child something that vocally demanding. I've had friends who are sort of our age saying to me, in my first singing lesson when I was at university, they gave me this. And I said, that's fine, but that's quite a lot for your first lesson. I think people need to slow it down a bit, go back to basics. I don't think there's a right age at all, but I do think that, you need to have driving lessons before you're allowed out on the road. It's something similar to that. Like, you need to go back to basics, go through the process, and when you're ready, go out and kick ass. Yeah, but I think there's no point in starting right at the deep end and not having the training for it. I don't think that I'm a Olympic diver, or something like that,
But okay, but like, for instance, that rival of yours, like, to get to that point that she was at, she would have had to have been training for many years anyway. So it kind of refutes what you're saying a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, she told me that she'd only been doing it for like 2 years. I think it
sounds like a lie.
Honestly, but how she was at that level, and if you could hear her, you'd be like, wow. But for her to be at that level when she was that young was quite unusual. Generally, people sound like Charlotte Church,
right.
That kind of choir girl,
right,
very
okay.
pure,
very
pure. Whereas she was fantastic. I don't want it to sound like I'm criticizing her, because she's amazing. But she had so much vibrato, and it was so rich and deep. And when she sang, she sounded like she was headlining at the Royal Opera House. Like, she was that good. And it was this tiny girl, and everyone just went, what? How? And I eventually got over my jealousy. But actually, as I grew up, I was like, I'm glad I don't sound like that. I've got my own sound, or I've got my own identity with that.
Do you know how she's doing now? Like, did she end up messing up her voice, or is she
I think
doing
she
well?
sings. I think she sings at weddings and stuff, and for fun. But I think she's ended up in politics, actually.
Oh, that's quite a career shift.
I think in somewhere in Germany, I think she's in politics. She's so good, though. She should have gone for it, but maybe she just overdone it. I don't know. I haven't seen her since I was 17, because I got kicked out of that school.
Do tell. How did that happen? How does one get kicked out of a singing school?
It wasn't a singing school. This is just my school I went to.
This was the boarding school, is that right?
Yes, but all of my schools have been boarding schools. It didn't suit me, so after this I went to my local sixth form.
Were they mixed boarding schools, by the way?
The first one was mixed, and I love that, because I find it easier to talk to men than women. I think that's just having two older brothers. It's just what you're used to. I got kicked out of my senior school because they suspected me of drug dealing, and they said that I was selling.
You got the look for it. You got the look for it. Quite.
I was smoking weed. I'm not going to lie about it. I was smoking weed. But I was certainly.
Did it help with your singing, by the way?
It helped my nerves.
Fair enough.
It probably didn't help my singing.
No, okay.
But I was so depressed. Like, I needed something, and it didn't actually help. I've been completely clean for how old am I? So like 8 years, maybe 7.
Well, that implies you were addicted to it then? Or?
I had issues, yeah.
Okay.
It's a family thing. We have addiction issues in my family.
I see.
But there was a moment when I was at uni where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And it was just it. I stopped drinking as much. I have a drink a year or something now.
Drinking's kind of overrated. I don't really ever drink, to be honest.
I just don't like losing control. That's all it is. But at school they said I was drug dealing to first years, so like 11-year-old kids, and I was in year GCSE year, so year 11, is it year 11? I can't remember. We called it different things, so we had like first form and fifth form and stuff. So and I was just like, you can't possibly think that I'd sell it to an 11-year-old kid.
Did they have any evidence as well?
No. At that point, they were just like, we think it would probably be best if you left. Because I was a weird I was not the right fit for that school.
So where did it leave you as far, because you said it was in your final year, so what happened to your GCSEs and stuff?
I did my GCSEs and I did a year of AS with them, and then
so they kicked you out in sixth form?
Yeah.
Oh, that doesn't matter.
No. So what happened was, I did I've got like 8 AS levels because of a weird little moment, which I'm often asked about in interviews. Actually, they're just like, "How come you've got so many?" And I'm like, "Well, had a year."
Wait, employers still ask about A levels?
Sometimes, yeah.
Why?
It's happened.
I always laugh. Yeah, I always laugh when employers like message me about that.
I get degree. A lot of people. So my job at the moment is legal work, but and they're like, "You've got a music degree. How does that work?"
But the thing that you're most recently doing typically negates everything beforehand. So like, if I get asked about GCSEs or A levels now, and I'm like, really? Like, why is this?
I had to fish out my GCSE certificates because I genuinely couldn't remember what I'd got.
Oh yeah, I had that same problem. I don't even know where my GCSE certificates are.
I was like, I did RE. I was like, I did an RS GCSE.
Yeah.
Okay. We had to because of my school, but so end of sixth form, we came to an agreement, me and that school, but I didn't fit in there. I wasn't their ideal student because they all, how can I say this, were very Chelsea. Very well off, very affluent families who all were generally very well connected. And generally they'd marry a guy from Eton and bake bread or jam or something for the rest of their lives.
God, it's just a different world entirely, isn't it?
It is. I found, and I was kind of a bit of well, for them, I was a total goth. They would have thought that I was like in My Chemical Romance. To them, they just didn't get it. I'd walk around in like the studded belts and stuff, and everyone else was super like trendy, I guess you'd call it. I don't really think that they were, but apparently, I really struggled there because I didn't live in London. I had nothing really in common with them, and I was young for my year.
Where were you living again?
Hampshire.
Hampshire, okay.
Between Hampshire and Paris, because my father was still working in Paris at the time. So I was in Paris from childhood up to about, I think 11 or 12. But yeah, I've lost my train of thought. What was I saying? I always struggled with them because I like people with integrity. It's a really important thing. And people who go on about their holidays on their yacht, to me, is just...
It's just they're really living up to the stereotype right there.
Yeah, honestly, I'd just be like, you can't be serious. You know, like, okay. And I remember saying one year, like, oh, we went to Normandy.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, that's very close, isn't it? I was just like, sorry. And they were like, we went to the Seychelles. And I was like, well, that's nice. What do you want me to say? Like, good for you. And I said, did you actually pay for your holiday? You know? And they're like, no. And I was like, well, shut up.
Paying is for commoners.
Honestly, they had their credit cards off their dad from a very young age, like 14, 15. They had a credit card. Yeah. And I've never had one. I remember being like, I wish I had money. I had a bit of a moment of just like, this is really unfair because they just spend it on stupid things that they don't need.
You know what's funny? I had a similar experience at school. So people always assume that I'm posh, right? They think I'm like middle class, upper class. Couldn't be further from the truth. I'm actually working class, have been, worked for everything I've ever owned or had. And
I like those people.
at school,
hardworking.
Well, it doesn't really matter what you're born into, whether it's a lot of money or no money. It's more about your attitude. But I will say that growing up, like we were really poor. I never went without anything. My mum always made sure I had like the basics and stuff. So we were okay. I had it better than some. Like I knew some people that were way worse off, and it really did sort of make me appreciate what I had. But yeah, I mean, I went to a very good public school in a nice area. So that's why I speak well. It's just a good school. That's it.
You do have an accent. I'll give you.
But that's the only reason. There's nothing else behind it. It's just it was a good school. But it was It was a unique position to be in because I saw both worlds. I saw kids like me that had nothing and lived in really bad places or really rough places or poor places, and then all the rest of my friends lived in 3-4 bedroom houses in really nice areas, and I just couldn't relate to that. And it was really funny when those rich friends would then come over to mine and see where I lived, and they were like, "You live here?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like,
"What kind of question is that?"
But no, they didn't mean it in a mean way. I mean, to be honest with you, I had a lot of space. That was one. My room was big, so that was good.
Nice.
But it was just, the place was falling apart. And
I had a similar thing to that at college, because I'd been surrounded by all these how can I say it, poshos. And I went to my local college and I met real people, and I was just like, I feel at home here. I fit in, because everyone's a bit left field and they've got opinions and they've worked hard and they do work hard. They don't just rely on coattails. But when they first came here, my parents have I think it's it's about 600-700-year-old house. And they came, and everyone who comes here goes, "Wow, you're rich." And I'm like, I'm not posh, I'm not rich, I'm very lucky. And I think people forget that sometimes you're not your parents. I'm not. I don't own this house. I couldn't afford London. That's why I had to leave. We were struggling in Hounslow in the tiniest flat I could ever conceive. So COVID happened, and we ran away basically. It's been a mad year.
So one thing I wanted to add, actually, which is the reason why I brought up my own sort of situation growing up, was that there were a lot of kids that had I don't know if you remember EMA, Educational Maintenance Allowance.
Yes.
So I'll explain for those who won't know. So when we were teenagers, there was this so this would have been in the
Have they stopped doing it?
Yeah. So like late 2000s, early 2010s, there was a scheme known as Educational Maintenance Allowance, EMA, basically free money from the government, intended for teenagers from low-income families, and it was supposed to be to help you with your studies, help you with books, resources, whatever. And it was a good concept. It's a shame that that it disappeared, because it was actually helping certain people. But here's the thing.
Oh God. Yeah.
My parents were not rich. They didn't, we were poor, right? But I always answered everything honestly on those forms, and they determined that I earned too much money, so therefore I couldn't get it. And I was like, well, that's a joke. We have literally nothing. But okay. But then there were rich kids that were lying, getting that money, and then just spending all that money on clothes and the latest like trends, phones, whatever. And it used to drive me nuts, because I was like, man,
I need this.
Yeah, I actually need it. Like, not just for that, but also just to live, like, to pay for lunch, to be able bus pass, go to London at the weekend, whatever. Like, I couldn't do any of that stuff. And they were taking that money. And to be fair, it quickly became apparent, I think, that the system was being massively exploited. And I think possibly the Conservative government got rid of it in the early 2010s. So boo. But
the Tories.
But to be fair, it was a very flawed system. I mean, it was supposed to be means tested, but everyone was lying on the forms, so they just scrapped it in the end. But yeah.
Some people in my year used to just spend it on like Subway.
Well, I mean, at least they're buying food, though. Do you know what I mean? They're not.
I was just like, don't you need to buy that book? And they're like, I'll get a PDF of it online. I was just like, okay, fine.
That's big brain. That's smart. Yeah, I don't blame them.
I was like, they've probably gone far. I haven't heard from them for a while.
Economics, baby. That's how it works.
Yeah.
So many questions.
There's so many. I want to talk about music. Let's talk about music.
Well, we'll get back to music. There's cool. Still some other stuff that I want to talk about with you. So obviously you mentioned that you were in a boarding school. I want to know more about you being in a boarding school. Tell us about what it was like going to a boarding school. Tell us some things that people might not know, might be surprised by. Let's go.
Okay. You have to pass checks that everything is tidy enough. I wasn't very good at that because I'm dyslexic, and dyslexic people aren't generally very tidy. So I was always in trouble. You have to go to chapel every Sunday. There's no excuse, even if you're dying, you have to go to Sunday chapel, which I would anyway because I was in the choir. So I'm not a religious person, so I just.
So you couldn't be ill. You couldn't like have the flu or something.
No, you'd still go. I think they just sit you in a corner so that you weren't infectious. It's bizarre. It's so bizarre. But they took it very seriously, but I also took choir very seriously. So while I'd kind of sleep through sermons and the religious bit, I'd be like, I'm going to sing the hell out of these hymns. What else about this? They monitor your food. So we used to put bread in our pockets in case we got hungry. But most of my school people were anorexic or bulimic.
Okay, is this for everyone or just the singers?
No, just the whole school. I say the whole school. Like, when you start to get a bit older. So when we were around 15 and people start to be aware of body image and stuff like that. And that's when people started developing eating disorders, and they were very on it. They'd watch people eating. I hate people watching me eat because of school, because you have to finish your plate. The plate has to be clean, and they watch you to make sure that you're not chucking it or I don't know.
Jeez.
Yeah, so I have a bit of a complex. I hate people watching me eat.
There's actually a name for that. I did a video on this on my second channel. It's called dipnophobia.
Oh, cool. I'm a dipnophobic. I hate it. It's honestly one of my biggest phobias. I honestly think that if you're at boarding school and you're in with the I hate this phrase, the cool kids, you have plain sailing, easy time. But if you're an alternative kid or you're slightly different, it's pretty much hell on earth because it's an inescapable prison. It's sort of like
why. Okay, aside from the obvious here, what like let's just move away from the out, being outcast and stuff. Being part of the popular crowd, like, why is it they had it so easy? What things did they have that you didn't have, aside from the obvious things?
Well, really basic. You have to share a room with people, a dormitory, until you're about 16.
Oh.
So they can literally be in your space every night, almost 24/7, because you're at class with them, you share a room with them. I actually at one point said I need to get out of here because these people are tormenting me, and
at night,
yeah, they'd I'm a bit of a wuss, and they'd tell horror stories, and I had a real life horror story as a kid. When I was a toddler, a lady tried to steal me and my brothers.
Oh wow.
True story, hand on heart. She couldn't have sons, and her husband wanted her to have a son. I was just part of the package deal, to 3 for 1. But she used to wait outside our home until we were playing in the garden, and we set up, well, I was a toddler. My parents set up cameras in the very early 90s, and we had a bodyguard in Paris.
Wow.
And they caught her, and she did her community service, was working in a nursery.
Oh, come on.
I know.
Come on. That's taking the piss.
Really? So anyway, hearing those sorts of horror stories about people coming in the night and all this, I was just like, nope. And I had to go and talk to matron. And eventually I was able to move into a room that was just 2 people, just me and another person and they were like, we'll put you in with someone who's quiet. And I was like, yes, I can sit with my headphones in. I was listening to Pablo Honey a lot back then, and I'd just have my portable CD player and just go to sleep. But it's things like that. It's you have to share a room. I think that you would have to share a room throughout your whole time at boarding school if it wasn't for bodies changing, and women requiring privacy. That would be a totally different system if that wasn't the case. But you don't get a choice about who you share a room with. You're just randomly assigned up until about 14 or 15, 16. It depends on the school. But it honestly, it's such a weird thing, because you have this tiny little space to claim as your own. Whereas everyone I was friends with when I left school, they had their room and it was just, they decorated it all themselves. Whereas I probably had like 3 meters of space that was mine. And a girl once ripped my posters in half. And I'd spent ages, because it's a beautiful Legolas poster. And I was really upset. So I ripped her poster, and I got in more trouble, and I was like, they did it first, but fine.
To tell us about how your school would deal with disciplinaries and punishments and stuff. I'm intrigued.
I think that they dealt with me a lot. I got the rough end of the stick quite a lot, and things were placed blame on me, and I'd be like, I was practicing in the music rooms. I was nowhere near that place. But you generally have to go and have a very uncomfortable meeting with either the head or the deputy head, and they'd say, do you understand the gravitas of what you have done, blah blah. And I was sort of just like, I haven't done anything. And I went through a phase of thinking that they were all stupid, so I'd speak French. But then they got in the French teacher. And they'd pick up on when I was swearing and stuff. I was very expressive. So that I had this real quite two-sided side to me at school, where half of me presented as this very angelic choir girl kind of thing, and then there was this other part of me that was quite, I want to say rebellious, but everyone, genuinely, there was a lot, I let out a lot of my pain through being a bit of a dick. I used to fight back, I used to answer back, and I'd always stand up for myself after a certain point, because I was fed up of just taking it. I started to sort of fight back. And so they'd get very confused, and they'd say to me, like, we don't understand you, because you work hard, you do the choir stuff, but you're also quite badly behaved. And I was just like, I don't know, I'd get a better school.
That kind of annoys me, because I had a similar experience at school as well. And it was, I blame it fully on the teachers, because my frustration was always in the teacher. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. German teacher would constantly say I was a troublemaker, but he literally divided the class into people that were going to succeed and get A stars, people that were going to on track to get like C's, and then everyone that was going to fail. I shit you not, he actually did this. Fucking
that's insane.
And when I asked him about it, I confronted him in the class in front of everyone. I was like, why are you deliberately discriminating? Like, don't you think that if you gave us a chance, we might actually have a chance of getting to that C instead of, you know, just giving up on us entirely? And he literally just turned around and said, oh, that's your problem. You know, you were disruptive and you lost out, kind of thing. And so many of my teachers were like that. Like my maths teachers were the same. That's why I always failed in maths. I was terrible at maths. And they literally, they literally would just basically come to me and tell me that I wasn't allowed to ask questions, that, you know, that was, you know, I was told that I speak too much in class. That, you know, there was a lot of things that I had to work through.
I think that there's a really interesting thing in there, because I relate a lot to the maths thing. And I don't know about you, but it's really informed my confidence with maths. As an adult, I'm terrible at maths, but that's because I was constantly being told by the teacher that I was in the bottom set, that I was bad, that I was only going to get a C. You know, that has really had an impact on me and tackling boring adult maths problems. And I just think, God, do better.
Yeah,
you know?
I remember the maths teachers literally getting angry with me when I would ask questions, but I was like, look, I don't understand. And the whole point is that when I ask you, you're supposed to explain it to me. But they would get angry because they'd have to explain it several times. And it's like, well, look, I excel at English. I get B's, A's, whatever at English. I'm just trash at this. And because obviously like the teachers talk and stuff. And I remember the teachers would sometimes say to me like, oh, I can't believe you must be a different student in so-and-so's class, because when you come to my classes, you're terrible. And it's like, yeah, but think about it. I do badly. I ask you questions. You tell me I can't ask questions. So then I fail. Like, what do you expect?
Teacher bants.
Yeah. And like, literally, here's the thing. You say you get like, I bet you sound like the same as me. You get rude, you get argumentative with the teachers because they put you into that scenario. So then you fight back, you call them out on their bullshit, and then you get brought in and scolded for doing so.
I think there's also a responsibility of teachers to monitor what's happening. You know, we were just left to our own devices. And if you're pigeonholed as the naughty kid, they're naturally going to think that you did it.
Yeah.
Or you started it. And that happened so often to me, and it happened actually in my first week at that school. And you know, I didn't get a great start because they
as well
didn't like me.
Yeah, this is an element to it as well, and something I've discovered in work as well. So like, listen up, people. Did you ever notice how like the bad kid, so to speak, would always get celebrated if they suddenly had a really good day, right?
Oh,
but
God.
then if you were a kid who worked their ass off, right, and then you had one bad day where, I don't know, maybe you were just too tired, maybe you had a bad mental health day, whatever, they would literally punish you like you just slaughtered someone. Because I experienced that at school, and I also experienced that in my very first job.
I experienced that at work as well.
Yeah. They do that. That's why you should never give 100% in any job. Always give like 80%.
90. Okay, 80.
I mean, unless you're really passionate about what you do and you love it, then fair enough. But if you don't fall into that trap of, oh, I need to work 60 hours a week, I need to impress them, I need to always work at this level, because you can't physically and mentally work at this level all the time. You can't do it. It's impossible. You'll burn out.
I hated those kids so much because I generally did work so hard. I wasn't always academic with everything, but you know, I was a linguist. And I always worked hard at music, so that was a natural thing for me. But then I'd get like 100% on every French test, and whatever, I'll call them Jane, would get like a 60 when she normally would fail. They'd be like, yay!
Yeah.
And I'm like,
where's my plaque? Where's my award? Where's my cookies? Yeah,
I want some bloody cookies.
But if one day you got like 91, they'd be like, oh, what happened, Lydia?
What went wrong?
What happened? Oh my God, we need to have a serious meeting now.
You're not working as hard as you should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's different approaches for different students. I remember thinking, like, they get away with it. I was quite antagonistic as a teenager, and I'd be like, well, how come they're getting away with it? That's really not cool. That's not fair. I work just as hard as them, and you let them get away with murder. And I went to a school reunion actually of that school. My friend refused to go because she had a similar experience to me. And I was like, come on, let's go. You're doing so well. You've got an amazing job. You've got a hot boyfriend. Please, let's go. And she was like, no. So I was like, I don't
blame your friend, because I think that whole school reunion thing is basically just one big flex
show off.
Yeah, it's like, fuck it, man. Most people don't like school.
I went because I just wanted to see whether they were exactly how I expected, and they were.
Oh, wow.
A lot of them, some of them were very friendly, and I was a bit freaked out. Actually, I was just like, "Why are you being nice to me?
Yeah,
you made my life hell." And
did any of them apologize at all?
No, God, no. I brought my partner along just so I could be like, just so you know, you told me I'd die a virgin.
Yeah.
This is my partner. And we were at some tiny little pub in Clapham, and I was just like, Tim, can we just like stay in the smoking area because they're making me really uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Or can we just get like a kebab and go home, because this is just weird for me. And it was weird because I didn't really have a lot to say for myself either, so certainly not to them. I don't feel they need to be let in to my life. So I sort of just, why am I here? Am I just here to boost numbers? Have you got to deal with the bar? Like, I started really trying to think of reasons. And then the saving grace was some people that I didn't expect to showed up, and they were really nice girls. And one of them was, I think she was about 8 months pregnant. And it was just all quite wholesome, this little group of us who weren't part of the set. So that kind of saved that. But I wouldn't recommend a school reunion to anyone. No. It's weird because you find yourself, as you said, Flex, you find yourself trying to show a better just trying too hard. They don't need that. Stop trying so hard. They don't deserve that, I think. Just be you, be as messy as you want. If I was in that way, I'd have been like, yes, I have a full-blown crack addiction. I was really tempted to just be like, I'm on my 5th marriage. I just wanted to mess with them. But at the final moment, I was like, I can't. I'm too much of a wuss. Yeah. But I'd planned this whole I collect buttons, like some unusual things. And sorry to any button phobes, if there are any of you out there. I know that exists.
Phobia of buttons?
Yeah, how cool are phobias? Phobias are so cool. There is a phobia of buttons. I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, I have a phobia of tea bags.
What? Why? What's that called?
I don't know. Wet tea bag phobia. So my partner leaves them in the mug and then drinks it, and then they're just left in there. And I've honestly developed a phobia of touching them and putting them in the bin. That's my phobia. I don't think that's a weird one.
I had the same thing with wet tissues.
Ugh.
Yeah. hate them. Burn them.
Let them die.
Yeah.
But bin it. What is it? Catch it, bin it, kill it.
Something like that.
Flu thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Oh, London. That was everywhere across town. I remember, especially on the underground. Yeah. God, no, don't go to a school reunion. unless you really want to, unless you genuinely have a lot of friends and you want to see them.
There were some people I liked from school, but to be honest, if I wanted to go hang with those people, I would just hang with them. You know what I mean? I wouldn't.
You're already in contact with them.
Yeah, like most. I'd say most people I went to school with were like okay, like there weren't. Like our year was actually unique in that like everyone for the most part got on, like even though there was that difference between alternative and mainstream. I think I was lucky in that I got on with most people, in like regardless of cliques or whatever. I don't know why. I guess I just was good with people, but I was very firmly in the alternative crowd, so I did get mocked occasionally. But it wasn't like brutal. Like I said, the people that I had an issue with were the people that were originally my friends that turned into my enemies, and they were part of the same clique as me. It's funny. I remember there was three of us, right? And I shit you not, the rest of the alternative crowd apparently referred to me as the nice one, because the other two were like so horrible. I had no idea. I found this out later.
That's not a bad bad title.
I'll take it. I wasn't the nicest ever. I had my own stuff going on, and I'd hold up my hands and say, hey, I'm sorry. But I do remember that they were literally bullying people, whereas I never did that because I, A, was being bullied, B, what the fuck, why would I bully people? And C, it was a short-lived thing. I spent most of my time hanging out with people outside of school rather than in school. Like I found most people at school I just had nothing in common with at all. So
we didn't have an alternative crowd.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah.
We had a crowd of sort of girls that were obsessed with lip gloss, hair straighteners, and if you didn't fit that, you weren't in.
Yeah.
So there was no hope for people that liked other things, really.
Did you have these like weird crazes? Like I remember at my school, like all the girls owned like a pair of Uggs. That was big.
I had an Uggs. I had some Uggs. Yeah, but they were black. Everyone had brown ones, and I was like, I want
actually
black ones.
Uggs though. Actually Uggs, or the fake ones.
I think that they were Uggs. They were present.
Okay.
And it was such a long time ago. They're really comfy, but actually, I remember having a discussion with my mum, and she was like, "You know that these aren't very ethical, right?" And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, now that they've died, let's not renew. Let's move on." And we moved on to some Dr. Martens.
Hey, good choice.
I've had them forever. I have to keep rebuying them every few years, but they're so good. I love them. And I like that they do vegan leather and all that stuff, because I love animals and I don't want them to just be killed for fashion and stuff like that. But I still eat. I'm a hypocrite because I still eat meat.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But yeah, I know what you mean about being a group of friends. There's always the nice one, the crazy one, and then there's like everyone has like a little role.
Well, the reason that I think that they called me that it wasn't about I know what you mean. This was different. This was like I was friends with the alternative crowd, but they had their own thing going on, and I'd sometimes hang with them, but a lot of the time I wouldn't, because I've never fitted into groups. This is something that I found out later. Like I can be in a group setting, I can get on with in group settings, but I'm better off on my own as like a lone wolf or whatever.
I struggle with groups.
Yeah.
I always find myself trying really hard to, even as an adult, trying hard to fit in. And that stems back to school, I think. But sometimes I get quite upset because I'm not being included despite my efforts. But I think that you've just got to sit back, work out, do I need this? Do I need to be part of this group? Is this going to really impact me? And more often than not, no. I'm a lone wolf as well. I love my own space. I'm used to spending time on my own. It's when I'm most productive. It's when I do all my singing stuff. I have to be on my own for that, because a lot of the stuff I do, I don't know if you've noticed, is like different layers. and it requires a lot of concentration, and I don't like it if people are crashing and banging around me. So I generally do it when people are not around. Yeah, I don't expect you to have watched everything I've put out there.
I genuinely don't have time, and that's nothing against you.
I know. No.
So
that's why I
thing
said
is,
it.
yeah, when you're a full-time content creator, it's like you try
Busy.
to quietly support like friends of yours and stuff, but the reality, look, let me just put it this way: if anyone ever expects me to watch all of their content, you're a lunatic.
That's gonna take
there's
hours.
Just no way. Yeah, there's
no
way.
Genuinely, I didn't mean that as like I expect.
No. I know.
No.
I'm just saying, like, a normal content creator always understand. Like, for instance, anyone that is a friend of mine that's also a content creator, they'll know that I never expect them to watch my stuff. Like, if they do, hey, that's nice, I'm glad you found some time and you checked it out, cool. Like, a good example, a friend of mine, shout out to Childish Jacko, we did a podcast.
I've heard you talking about them before, actually.
Yeah. So we did a podcast together before I did my own podcast, right? Very short-lived. And I remember this because it was very true. Because we were all together, there was this like unwritten kind of like rule, as though we had to check out each other's content every time we would drop videos. And it was almost, and no, don't get me wrong, no one said you have to watch my video, but we felt like we were not being supportive if we didn't do that. And he said to me after the podcast ended, he was just really honest and said, you know what, like, there was a point where I really didn't like watching, you know, your stuff because I just, you know, had to, and then I stopped watching, and then I then fell in love with it again. I mean, he didn't word it like that, but he said that he enjoyed watching my stuff again because there was no compulsion to have to do so. You know, it was like he could just do it in his own time when he fancied to. And he genuinely enjoyed it like that. And I knew exactly what he meant, because it's like, as soon as you feel like you have to do something, it sucks all the fun out of it. It's like,
I think everyone has their own offering. And my favorite thing with yours is when you actually, my favorite example is when you do Hey Jude and you do like completely your own take on it. And I'm like, yes, you know, like, I love it when people bring their own things to the table. And I think that's what makes.
It's funny. I actually try to keep that one specifically closer to the original.
Well, I think it's different.
It's interesting.
Not like you add in like a certain like na 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 na, and then you're like na 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 na, and I'm just like, yes.
That's actually fun fact. That's just me trying to keep it in tune, in key.
Oh, really?
That's not intentional. Well, it is intentional.
I thought that was just you being super artiste, and
that's me
like,
trying to. I
think you've got a very natural ear for harmony.
What I'm basically thinking about is it in the right key? Okay, no, it's sounding like it's going to go off. Let's take it higher. So then it keeps it in key, and then I can switch to the next note, and it will still sound.
Yeah, I think you've got a very natural ear for harmony, and that's one of the things I love about my whole TikTok journey, is that I'm improving.
Yeah.
Still. You know, I generally sopranos are given quite a bad rep as not having any ability to harmonize. So when I've done like my I did one from Lord of the Rings, I've done something from Game of Thrones, and it's different parts, and I found that my ear is really improving, and that's just so satisfying for me, because it's something that I used to kind of struggle with. I was just a standard choir girl who just did the top line and didn't worry about what was happening under me, so to speak. So actually having the chance to work on that and improve, it's addictive and it's so satisfying. And I love movies, so for me that is my natural kind of go-to. And I, as I said, I'm obsessed with soundtracks, so it's like a really obvious choice for me, that, and it's my favorite thing to do, actually. But I do get some fun requests that are like a really, really obscure. One of my favorite ones was a really, really obscure lullaby from like the 70s from Doctor Who. And I was just like, sure, yeah. And then I haven't done it yet, but I've got one from an ice skating movie from the 80s, which I'd never heard of. And I was just like, what is this? I've never heard of this. And it's apparently like it won an Oscar. And I was like, how have I never heard of this? I think social media is a chance for people to really, if they do it right and it's not very like me, it's actually a chance to grow and to learn and to be a better version of yourself.
Couldn't agree more.
That's the best kind of usage of it for me. When I can see that people are just there being like, I'm amazing, I'm just going to sit here and play. I'm like, no, let me phrase this right. If I'm not seeing them actually like, if I can sense that they're really cocky, and that I'm instantly turned off.
Yeah.
But if there's a vulnerability there and a sense of them growing and learning and allowing us, the audience, to be a part of that, I think that's the magic. That's the key. That's the magic ingredient. And I think that's eventually something that I like to think that I'd be able to show. I have never been a cocky person. I'm way too shy for my own good and way too apologetic, and worried about offending people, because I know what it's like to receive really weird comments, and then it turns out that I was misinterpreting. So you've told me I'm too apologetic before.
You are.
Yeah.
But the only reason I say that is because I used to do the exact same
I am
thing.
trying to get out of that, actually, because I think it's about time I had a full voice. I'm not going to apologize for me. But I hate cockiness. I'd never do that. And I want I'd hate for that to be something that people perceive from me, is this air of arrogance that I see quite often. But a lot of the time you're told, look confident, and it's so hard to tell sometimes whether someone is acting confident or if they genuinely think that they're the dog's bollocks. I find that quite hard, a difficult line to trace. So yeah, I'm always interested by that. Just, are they cocky, or are they just putting it on for the camera?
Do you have a sort of warm-up routine that you do before you start singing? And if so, what does it involve?
Do I have a warm-up routine? Yes, I start, actually, this sounds so bizarre. I start by breathing, like long breaths.
Helpful.
It's very helpful. Long breaths, and I try and then you can try and do quite. I'm not going to do it down because it's going to sound very weird, but like sharp intakes of breath. So like, I'm not continuing that because it's going to sound horrible. It's going to sound horrible. And you can continue that, and it's. I said earlier about the hands thing. I move around. I do a bit of loosey-goosey, and I make sure that I'm standing properly. So sometimes if I'm feeling very energetic, I'll do like what's it called? Like that Rasputin thing where they're like, hey, yeah. I need to be energetic to sing, or it's not gonna happen. And when it comes to the actual singing part of it, there's the vowels, and then my singing teacher taught me one which is really hard to say. So you go like ninga 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 ninga, like ninga. It's really hard to sing. And I said to her, this is dangerously close to quite an offensive term.
I was gonna say, like, that's interesting.
And I was like, she was like, do it with ginger, and it doesn't work. So you've just got to be very careful with your pronunciation. But it does work. And then you can do all the lip trills, and the interesting thing is, I think, for people that will help them if they're wondering how can I improve, is to not warm up to the note that they want to hit. You've got to warm up to above it. And then there are some other tips as well, like raising your eyebrows, and if you want to hit a note, and like really extending. It's very physical. And I think a lot of people just think, oh yeah, it's natural, but actually 95% of the time you're like, and there's a lot of physiological, like without going into too much detail, for women certainly, you can kind of tense and produce a better sound. I don't know how to make that say that without being gross.
No, I know what you mean.
So like pelvic floor involvement can help. So you know, there's all sorts of things that you can do. I don't really, but you know, I should get fitter. It would really benefit me. But at the moment, it's kind of the last thing on my mind. I want to get through this period of our lives. You know, this has been a really tough year, and actually singing did suffer for a bit because I was just worrying about being unemployed, and universal credit just doesn't cover, you know. But now I've got some temping work, and I feel like, okay, I'm in a happier place. I'm going to get back on the singing, and then I'll get back on the trying to get fit malarkey. But that's very important as well. And just sounds bizarre as well. I have a little affirmation of like, you're going to kick ass. I just tell myself, like, you can do this, you've got this. It really helps my mindset. My singing teacher, one of them she was quite on PC, and she'd just be like, don't pull a face like a, can I say a spack?
The what, sorry?
She'd say like, don't pull, I'm trying to say this in a really PC way, but she wasn't PC. She'd be like, don't pull a face that makes you look like you're retarded.
Okay.
While you're singing. And that's something else that you got to think about. You've got to think about how your face looks. But I'd just be like, wow. And sometimes I'd hear that in the back of my mind and just be like, that's a really bad thing to say.
Yeah.
And that would give me like an impetus to be like, I am going to kick ass, I'm going to be good, and I'm going to prove that that is not a thing.
Yeah.
You know, so I've heard it all over the years. You know, like when I was younger, my warm-up process would involve a bit of a panic attack. I did a solo when I was 16 in the Vatican.
Oh wow.
And God, was it 16? It was 2 weeks before Pope John Paul II died. And we went to the Vatican, and I was in St. Peter's Basilica, and I sang a piece from the Fore Requiem, the Pie Jesu. I know you're into your pieces. You might know that one. And before it, my mum came, and I was like, Mum, I can't do this. The pressure is just too much. I'm in this huge, I'm in the Vatican. Mum, I'm in the Vatican. And she was just like, firstly, I don't think it's a good idea to swear in the Vatican. But
up in the motherfucking house.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna hide behind a pillar. I used to hide behind pillars. If there was a way I could hide, I would. And that changed a lot.
While singing.
Yes, I did one concert where it went so well, and they said it was great, but we couldn't fucking see.
Nice.
And I was just like, yay, because I prefer to sound good and not to be visible.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Vatican thing. Oh, sorry, that made me laugh. The Vatican thing, I was terrified. That is probably one of the most terrifying things I've ever done. And I had a complete meltdown. And then I did it, and it was this. Oh my God, it was so good, because like I'd been bullied and people were like, you shouldn't sing, you're a bit crap, you know. And I had this really like self pride, like I felt so powerful, and I did it, and I was like, I got asked to sing, not you.
Well done.
You know, and it was just this really empowering thing where I was just like, you can say nothing to me now. And it took a moment of, I took an opportunity for me to realize my own self-worth and my own talent, to be able to then turn around to people and say, actually, you don't know what you're talking about. And I've sung in an opera when I was in my 20s, but that was just cool. I was in the chorus, which is still amazing, but it wasn't like a fully staged, it was just a concert version. But I still say, like, I've been in an opera, because I've sung in an opera. It just wasn't like all the scenery and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's quite funny when when you're looking through your CV and you have to kind of adjust it for different jobs. And I'm just like, I haven't really done anything except musical stuff. Like, I put so much energy into it, and now I'm not really, it's not my full-time job.
Right.
And it's always just like all that effort for, it will happen one day. I'm sure it will.
Don't give up on it yet. No,
I believe in, it can happen anytime.
I honestly,
it's not my time. It's not my time yet.
I believe it will happen for you. You're definitely very talented.
I think hopefully. It depends. It depends on if I broaden a little. I think I could do with doing some more modern stuff, maybe.
Ooh.
But I don't know. It's difficult because I don't consider myself much of a guitarist or a pianist. So it's just me, myself, and phone microphone. I don't have a kit. This is new. The green screen thing is new, and I've got a ring light coming. But
wow.
Because my best friend said to me, "Your videos are beautiful, Lids. They're lovely, but your camera is so fucking shaky. I can't see you."
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And I was like, I'll try holding it somewhere, like putting it up on a bookcase. And they were like, it's still not great because like half of you's cut off. And I was like, you know what should I do? And he was like, well, when I go live. And I was like, all right, mate. He just sits and talks about Star Wars.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's made me think, there are things I can do to improve.
Do you know, I know where you're coming from on that. Like, people ask me all the time, like, why don't you get better equipment? Why don't you get a green screen? Why don't you get a camera? Because I don't have any money. That's why.
This is a loan.
Yeah, literally, I'm so broke right now. Like, okay, for example, people who regularly watch the podcast will notice that my camera quality has now dropped back to the original quality. For a while, I had a better webcam. Want to know what happened? The webcam broke because it was cheap and crap. And it should have lasted. I listened
to your podcasts, though. I had no idea about your camera.
Yeah, so I do a YouTube version.
Yeah.
And I was really happy with the quality of the camera. It wasn't the best ever, but it was decent. It was a sort of a plug in and play type thing. Mm-hmm. And then it just started breaking for no apparent reason. And now I've just had to drop back down to this, which is frustrating. But it's the same thing all the time. I don't have money for the camera stuff. I don't have money for lighting. Yeah. Don't have money for green screen.
Independent artists, like it's, I can't do it. I can't do it all at once. It's got to be a very slow process.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of people have a very obvious, amazing setup, and I'm just like,
I envy them so much, man.
Come on,
so much.
Like, and people buy them things. I see a lot of things.
Oh wow.
Like, someone just bought me a microphone, and I was like, wow. But a good microphone is like 80 quid starting.
Do you know as well, like, I remember some people asked me like, oh hey, it would be good if we could send you stuff, and it's like, yeah, that would be great, but guess what, you have to pay for a PO box as well, and I don't have money for that either.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh man,
everything
is it
costs
expensive?
Money. Yeah, to get, yeah, I think I'm pretty sure
you don't want to give people your actual address.
No, you can't do that.
No. I'm terrified of, like, I don't know, someone just turning up in the village where I live and just being like, I've seen you, which is very unlikely, but
it's quite scary.
Yeah, it's quite a scary, like, I never put where I live, even on Instagram posts, because it's quite.
Why would you? Yeah,
it's a touristy village. There's a tourist aspect to my village, to do with literature. So a lot of people come here, but I don't want to tell people.
Yeah, no, of course not.
On Instagram, like, you can find me here, and sometimes it comes up with my neighbor's house, and it's actually named, and I'm like, nope. Why would you name exactly where you live and show off the interior of your home? Are you an idiot? Like, it's just asking for trouble. But yeah, I've gone a long way off from warm-up routines.
Well, actually, that leads me on to the next question. So, now you've said kind of like what the routines you do are before you actually start singing, but do you have any kind of like habits, superstitions, or maybe rituals that you always do before you perform?
One of the things I always have to do is because I've got a folder. I generally perform with a folder, not off memory, because when you're being paid, it's not worth making a mistake. So I actually, because I'm a bit forgetful and dyslexic, I have to check like 1,000 times that the music is in there and it's in the right order. And I go through the sort of, if it's a wedding, I'll go through the order of service and be like, this is what you listen out for. My superstition is to be over prepared. I don't have any weird like things that I do though. I think I tend to just think, because I think nerves are a very important part of performing. So I let them do them. I say magic. It's horrible. It is a horrible experience, that level of nerves. But I think you've just got to ride the wave, and when you're doing it, you're like, yes, this is going all right. I don't need to be so nervous. Yeah, but something changes in your physiology, and you become calmer while you're doing it. But the lead up is honestly the worst bit for me. So I also believe in not drinking too much water. That's a bit of a weird one, because people are always like, oh, make sure you drink lots of water, and I'm like, actually, sometimes that dries out my throat.
Me too. It's quite common.
And so people offer things, that piece of advice, and I'm like, no, sorry. And then they'll say, do you want some ice cream? And you shouldn't have dairy.
Yeah.
There are lots of things that you need to consider. But no, I tend to just sort of try and get a good night's sleep, and wake up early, get everything ready, because I've got some performing gowns, and part of the ritual of the week is ironing them and getting everything like ready to go. I find that a very satisfying thing, and I love singing at weddings. It's the happiest thing, and I get such lovely letters from the people that I've sung for, and they're just like, one of them said our favorite moment of our whole wedding was they just got married, and they're waiting, like, they leave together, and then they were waiting in like the ante room, I guess, like the lobby. The lobby of a church, and they were like, we could just hear, it was just us, and we could hear you, and I was just like, oh, that's so sweet. That's this is your wedding day. It's not about me. I am a side player. I'm irrelevant, really.
NPC.
Yeah. I think it's very much not about me at all, and I think that that's something that's really important to remember, actually, for people who are considering it, is it's not about you, it's about them. And I'll offer them my advice. I'll say, because sometimes they'll say, I don't really know what I want, so we'll chat, and we'll come up with, I've got a playlist actually for people to listen to, of things that I like singing, and if they don't know what they want, then they can go, actually, I really like X, Y, or Z. So it's down to them, but I help if they need it. But I've seen I've heard about a lot of things where this is no name, but I've heard of a singer local to me who demanded extra money because it was a small wedding, and then they demanded extra money because they were stuck in traffic, and they spent more money on traffic, like petrol, because they were stuck in traffic. And my whole outlook on the whole thing is low rates, because people are already spending thousands and thousands. I don't believe in being overly greedy, you know. So I have a very low very low pay rate, but because I love doing it, and you know, they give me a bit for time learning pieces and time practicing and the day itself and getting there, but it's very low. Some people charge sort of 800 quid. I am way below that. But these divas give us a bad name, and I can't stand a diva, you know. But we're not Mariah Carey. We're as you said, an NPC. We're not really very important in the grand scheme of things, but if we can make their day just that little bit more tuneful, then bloody marvelous, and I'm a happy person, they're happy, and we can carry on, you know. Like it's a really basic situation, really. Like I can't believe that some people could get very diva-esque, really. And it's not like you're singing at the Royal Opera House, you're singing at a church in wherever.
So you mentioned, you know, some of the performances that you've performed at that you're proudest of. Obviously BBC Proms is one of them, singing in the Vatican. Even I didn't know that. That's incredible.
I don't tend to shout about it, you know, because it is just so unbelievable. You know, my family still make fun of me that I sang and then 2 weeks later the Pope died. You know, like they.
It's all your fault, Lydia.
I killed him. No, they still make fun of me to this day, and I haven't been back since, but I want to go back 15 years later.
Yeah, they won't let you back because
they won't let me back. I killed those little guards in the Vatican. Would just be like, lay, and they'd be like, they'd get their little pikes and just, you know. I would love to go back though, if they let me. I don't think they'd even remember. They didn't take my name. It was like
it is her, the one who kills popes.
Il Papa.
Il Papa. No.
Yeah, that was probably the coolest performance. But I've done very many. I'm very lucky as a performer to have done some very cool things.
Let's switch it up. Mm-hmm. Any performances that didn't go so well? What happened? How did you overcome them?
Any performances that didn't go so well?
Please tell me your worst moments, please, for our enjoyment.
I will. I have a good one, but it's not necessarily singing, but this is possibly the worst.
Oh.
We were playing. God, what was it? When I was 13. I still think about this. And we were playing Waterloo by ABBA in orchestra, and it was house music. So we'd have these like houses at boarding schools for competitive events. So like sport music. Yeah. So we had house music, and we were singing. Don't laugh, but we were singing. My house's song was the Wombles song.
Well, as in,
for some reason,
one balloon,
underground, overground, yeah. And so the other houses had Sailing by Rod Stewart and Waterloo by ABBA. They had songs. We had the fucking Wombles.
That's so random.
But our house was called Agincourt. You could have come up with something like a battle song. And I forgot my sheet of paper with the words on, and I had a solo, and I just stood there, like I just didn't know. And I was just like, I was mortified. And I was like, I can never forget.
So you just didn't do anything. You just stood there.
I stood there, and someone, the music teacher at the side, like went like, she kind of went, oh shit, they're not singing, I'm just gonna pretend. That was the most humiliating moment for me. And it happened as well during a orchestra performance when I was playing my flute. And you really do need the music when you're playing in an orchestra, and I was just sat there just miming. And I told my mum, and she was like, you just need to get better at not losing things. You just need to get better at like being forgetful. And it turned out with the singing one that I was sat on it and it was on my seat. That was my most humiliating musical moment. And I struggled with that for a while. I won't lie. That was very, very embarrassing. And in terms of, okay, at my school, they put on Joseph. And this isn't necessarily embarrassing for me, but embarrassing for the whole bloody school. They blacked us up.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was deeply, deeply embarrassed. But like, that was, I felt really uncomfortable. But
did you have any black students?
Yes, we had kids from Nigeria in my school who I don't think they were particularly impressed.
Yeah,
it wasn't like, I hate saying this kind of thing. It sort of looked like very fake tan, but very like dark. And we were just like, can't we just be ourselves? You know, everyone knows that we're at a school in England and we're not in like the Middle East. Everyone knows. It's not going to come as a surprise that we look the way we do. And they went ahead with it. That was possibly my most sort of cringe, deep level cringe moment.
At least it's not on camera though. That's one.
No, but my mum's got photos, like old Polaroids.
Burn them.
And the other day my partner was like, can I see them? This sounds terrible. And I was like, if I can find them. We've got this huge photo box. It's got thousands of photos that are just unsorted. And I did find them maybe 2 years ago and just went, I'd forgotten about this. And it all came flooding back to me. And I was like, how the hell did we get away with that?
It's the worst.
That's just the naughties in school to me. Like the early naughties, things weren't as
things were I know what you mean. Things were different back then. Like when I look back at some of the things that were acceptable then that aren't now, I do kind of understand where people are coming from, but at the same time, like it was a different mentality. I don't think people were as readily offended by things or took exception with it. Like, don't get me wrong, I think there was a lot of stuff that should have been called out at the time that wasn't, but there was a lot of other stuff that I don't know. I mean, okay, like for instance, if you take something like Little Britain, I don't remember people kind of getting crazy about it at the time. Like there were a few things in the media about it being offensive, but it wasn't really picked up on in the same way. Like for a better example actually would be Bo Selector. So the guy, Leigh Francis is his name. Not many people know that, but yeah, he's the guy who plays Keith Lemon. Proper Crimbo. So he's actually since apologized for playing certain characters in the show. And to the best of my knowledge, like no one really took offense with it at the time or since then, but there have been sort of calls to have it banned. Same with Little Britain. I think Come Fly With Me has also been removed from a lot of places.
Yeah, I did watch that when it came out. because I quite enjoyed Little Britain. I don't know whether it was because Tom Baker narrated it.
Oh yeah. Oh wow, I didn't even put that together.
Yeah,
Of course he
so
did.
I was just like, I'll watch that, and then I watched it and I was like, it's on. You know, we didn't have Sky, so it was just on, and
it's a tricky one, isn't it? It's like I do get where people are coming from. And I do understand the decision to have these things removed, and why, for instance, you know, doing that is not okay. I do understand that. But at the same time,
I heard that they want to get rid of an episode of Fawlty Towers that has the German jokes. And I was just like, you can't, because this, I don't know a single German person who's offended by it, for one. And it's done cleverly.
It's an interesting debate, though, isn't it? Because I think there's a certain contingent of people that are saying we should just ban anything from the past that doesn't sort of fall in line with what we believe now. And that's one train of thought. I do understand where they're coming from. But the other sort of contingent says that we should leave things as they are, not just because we shouldn't sort of fiddle with the past, but also because it kind of stands as a way of representing, you know, our progression moving forward. I tend to kind of agree with that. You know, I don't think these things should be celebrated. I don't think we should be going around going, oh, wasn't it great in the 70s when we used to make jokes like this? No. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think they should just be outright banned. I think it does kind of show our progression and as a society.
I like a lot of artists that have turned out to be bad in some way. You've got to separate.
See, I can't do that. I know what you mean.
Not separate art from artist.
No.
Well, some people can.
Like, okay, for instance, the guy from Lost Prophets.
Oh no.
See what I mean? Yeah, but see what I but going by your same logic.
I know exactly what you mean, and I'm a total hypocrite.
You know what's interesting? The even
depends on the person.
Even the people that were in that band, they're in a new band now. I was looking them up the other day. They're called No Devotion or something.
Okay.
But yeah, so they set up a band quite soon after that happened, and they were asked in an interview whether they would play Lost Prophets songs, and they said no, we refuse to, because they feel that the songs are tainted. Yes. And but here's the thing. See, before you said you're able to separate the art from the artist. So, but
I can still listen to the Lost Prophets though, if I had to. I haven't for years. I couldn't.
You know what's really odd as well, because you never hear it anymore. I actually came across this because I was looking up. There was like this documentary on YouTube that someone had put together. It was like worst people in music. It was actually pretty interesting, and he came up. Obviously, his name always comes up, and because it's recent as well. It happened in like 2012 or something. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
I haven't obviously listened to their music since then, because I did grow up as a Lost Prophets fan.
I think Start Something was in like 2003.
That's when they became big. And I was a Lost Prophets fan. I liked the aesthetic of Ian Watkins and that band and everything, and their music.
I saw them live.
Right. And it's a weird thing, because their music hasn't been played since, and there was a lot of people saying that, oh yeah, their music is still played around the world. Well, I'm pretty sure it isn't anymore. And in this documentary, they were playing some of the music, and it felt weird listening to it, because it's like, I remember that, but I literally haven't heard it since then, and I never hear it on radio. I never hear it anywhere in the world. It's like it's almost been blacklisted.
How do you feel about Michael Jackson? Because that wasn't necessarily proof. You know, they didn't necessarily prove it.
I really don't know on that one.
Yeah, that's difficult. Some of them you do. I think it's a case by case.
The thing with Michael Jackson is that like the evidence is so strong both ways that it's impossible to know. You know what I mean?
I'm not saying that I listen to every single bad person's music. I have to do it like case by case.
I think it's an important discussion to have. Take a different.
I still like Kevin Spacey's movies.
Different industry. Professional wrestling. There's a wrestler called Chris Benoit, who very famously killed his family and himself in a double murder suicide. This happened in 2007. I remember when it happened. It was crazy. Yeah, and I was a massive fan until that happened, and then I remember like ripping up my shirt and just getting like really angry about it. And there were a lot of people I've spoken to this day who, when Because, okay, what the company chose to do, WWE, they chose to kind of blacklist him from he's never mentioned, he's never obviously promoted, he's not celebrated in any shape or form. But obviously there's a lot of coverage of him. But they purposefully don't advertise those matches. So a good example is the main event of WrestleMania 20 was him, Triple H and Shawn Michaels. And that was a fantastic match. And at the end, there's this really amazing scene of him with Eddie Guerrero, and they're like hugging, and it's like a big bro moment. And it was a really emotional moment. It was a fantastic moment, but they never show you that anymore. Nor do they show you any of Chris Benoit's matches. He's not featured. They will actively not put certain Royal Rumbles on YouTube because of that. Like, they don't come out and say it, but you know that they're doing it. And they've also done a thing where they don't list him at all. So if you search for him on the WWE network or something like that, he doesn't come up. You can find those matches. They haven't been removed. Like, if you go watch them, it will still say Chris Benoit versus Kurt Angle, you know. But he's just never.
I feel like I know that name in a very distant part of my brain, and I'm trying to connect the dots. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's not. I've gone into a lot of detail here. My point is there's a lot of people in that industry that can still watch it and separate the performer from the person, and I do understand that. I think, though, that maybe there's a bit of a difference between that and then, say, music, because, for instance, more recently Marilyn Manson has gotten into some trouble, right? And
I used to be a fan.
Same. And it's I don't know, like, my kind of view on it is I don't hold it against people that choose to listen to the music, because there's a lot of people that say, oh, if you're checking that stuff out, you're supporting it. No, I think you're only supporting it if you're actually actively buying that stuff. If you're buying those records, buying merchandise from that person, then
vinyls,
then it's going to that person. But if you're just listening to it or absorbing it, consuming it, that's up to you. I don't think it's.
Yeah, I think it's definitely depends on the person. I also think it's quite interesting. Like, we obviously, if someone's a paedophile, we're gonna fucking call them out for it. But in the case of someone like Amy Winehouse, who had big problems, we celebrate them. I just think that there's an interesting kind of split there, because, you know, people shouldn't be, speaking as someone who used to do a lot of drugs, people shouldn't be thinking that it was cool, you know, what she was doing. I think
do anyone really think that, though? I mean,
I don't know. I think I've known people who thought, wow, they look really cool.
See, with Amy Winehouse, I feel like a lot of what I see is the tragedy. Whenever she's mentioned,
I cringe. I'm just like, oh, she's so brilliant, but oh,
it's tragedy. Her life, you know.
Yeah.
The thing about her life is, you see all these wonderful photos of her, you see all these wonderful performances of her, but she was troubled. Everyone knows that. And I don't know, every time I see videos or photos of her, all the comments just say, oh, it's such a tragedy. Oh, it's such a loss. And it's true. You know, with some help, she could be here to this day, but it was just a real
all my favorite artists are dead.
Such is life.
Yeah. It's interesting. Are you aware of
Varg?
The metal guy.
Varg.
My partner.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That's a really interesting example.
That documentary that I checked out the other day listed him.
He burnt down churches and loads
really
of
crazy.
Stuff. And he was just, because I was talking to him, like, do you view him differently as a musician? He said, no, he's still a badass musician. He's just done some really questionable things.
So that's interesting that your partner can separate the two
completely
things.
But he said, I in my scene, in the metal scene, a lot of the time people have done criminal activity, so I said, don't tell me you're used to it, because it's not normal. Like, it isn't something that you just go, oh yeah, I'm part of the I don't know, I live in downtown New York, so I'm used to people getting murdered. It's not normal.
Yeah, it's not.
You know, like, it's not normal. So I was just like, okay. But anyway, it suddenly came to my mind, oh, Varg, I've heard of him. And he's done some things. I think he's killed people as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Weird. Some weird stuff happening in that community.
What tips could you give to aspiring classical singers?
Aspiring classical singers. My tip would be listen to as much classical music as possible. Work out what you love. Work out what style you love. And just try and consider that when you're training your instrument. I knew very early on who my favorite composers were and what my favorite opera was. I consider that quite a blessing, actually, because it's such a huge part of me. And I had a vocal idol, and she was always the end goal. And just finding the right teacher, that's important. You need to find someone who you feel comfortable with. And for an aspiring classical singer, I would say language lessons are an absolute must. Not necessarily all of them, and you don't have to be fluent, but a good grasp of the Romantic languages is really helpful. I remember I did a song in Hungarian, and I've sung in Polish with the choir, Russian. There's some very difficult languages out there, and I thought, do I need to have learnt this? And no, I don't need to know Polish, but certainly for a classical repertoire, essential is French, German, Italian, and if you're really good, Russian, because Russian's cool. I only learnt one sentence in Russian, which is like "Mon koshka jest яблоко," which is like my cat eats apples, I think. But having a good understanding of how to form the words and how to actually put them into music, it really helps. I was always lucky with that because I grew up in another country and I had a sponge brain for languages, so that was always part of the magic for me. It's not something that I had to try very hard with, except German isn't my natural sound. But there's so many. It's also just be confident in what you're doing and stick at it. Just keep going, because everyone has a bad moment. Everyone has a moment. I don't know a single musician who hasn't had a moment where they're like, I'm rubbish. I don't even know why I'm doing this. What am I doing? I don't know a single person who hasn't had that moment who's a musician. And the key is how you get out of that. Now, some people say, I took a bit of a break because I needed it, and they come back and they're all guns blazing and they're ready and they fight. And I really admire that. But other times, I think people do give in, and I think it's really sad. And I think, you hear about it with people who play the saxophone and stuff like that. Like, they just have a bad moment and they don't pick it up again. And I think it's important to keep trying, is essentially it. And just to ignore probably everything I've said during this podcast. Just it's finding, it took me such a long time to understand this, but I found that finding some kind of inner peace with the music and connecting with it and understanding it and fully understanding everything that's happening around it has completely transformed me performing it. So, for instance, I'm doing a piece from an opera. Now, your vocal teacher will probably say, a very quick summary. Too quick. I think it's important to know the story, know what you're about, and know what happens next is really important. So it's just sort of taking the time to really understand what you're doing and understand the importance of why you're doing it, and to not do it for anyone but yourself, really. I don't know. I could go on about this for days, but I think that there's a problem with young people and confidence, especially around music, because music is disappearing in schools, and it's becoming a very expensive passion. I was always very lucky because my parents, without fail, always supplemented this. They paid for me to have lessons, and they paid for me to join the choir, and they paid for me to go on choir tours and all this stuff, because they were like, this makes you happy, go forth, you know. So I do consider myself, pardon me, very fortunate. But it's a worry that music isn't considered very important, when it has proved, like, that science has proven that it has all these benefits. Choral singing in particular, it's just worries me as someone who I have a niece and she's 5, and she's starting to sound like she has a bit of a tuneful voice, and I was just like, yes, inherited the genes, because my father is a very good singer. And I suddenly thought, is she going to have music class in school by the time she's actually there? You know, she's only 5. So it's just stuff like that. I wish that people understood the importance of it. It's not just a hobby. It's actually something that people should allow. I don't know about you, but when I was at school, it was that class where, like, it was fun. And everyone was just like, yeah, you get to go and sing for an hour. Like, it's so important in the school week to break it up with something where people can learn about music and sing and let out some steam. But it just, it's so important, and it's certainly been the most valuable thing in my whole life. And I know that's a pretty big thing to say, but I would not, I don't think I'd be around. I have demons, and singing soothes them. Yeah.
What's the biggest life lesson that you've learned so far?
My biggest life lesson? Say yes. In most scenarios, not everything. But just don't be afraid to say yes. Don't undersell yourself. And it's going to sound pretty cheesy, but, like, always strive for the best version of yourself, really, I think and be nice, actually. Don't be a dick to other people. I've seen a lot of people who are musicians who aren't very friendly to other musicians, because it's this horrible competitiveness. And I'm just like, no, this is not the point. We're meant to celebrate each other and really show up. And I think, be nice, allow people to be nice to you. Don't be dismissive, and you won't get anywhere if you don't work hard. So I think it's pretty basic stuff. I'm not full of answers, unfortunately, because I'm still trying to figure out my own life. But along the way, I've gone, I need to stop saying no to things because I'm scared. And I never really entered competitions and stuff because I was too scared. I was like, too much rides on this for me, and if I lose, it could ruin it. So I never entered competitions or anything like that. And I applied for the sort of Royal Academy of Music kind of things. and I didn't get in. Of course I didn't, because my academics weren't up to scratch, and I completely bombed my interviews because I was so nervous. And you have to do a few pieces, and I bombed those because I was so nervous. And I look back and I think, imagine, I said it recently, I think, like, if you had put your energy of your nerves into that, you'd be in a completely different place. So I also think it's important to work out a way to deal with your nerves and to know that they're a natural part of the process.
Yeah.
Really.
As we draw things to a close today, do you have any upcoming projects or maybe some final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Upcoming projects. I do want to do the entire, score of the Fellowship of the Ring, choral moments. I found a thing online with lots of with basically the score, and I was like, oh, this appeals to my nerdiness, and I'm going to do that. I think I'd like to try and put stuff out every day, but it's quite difficult on top of a very busy 9 to 5:30. So my upcoming goals are basically just to keep at it and not give in, because I've got so close to quitting so many times, and just being like, not quitting singing, but quitting the whole social media game, just because I don't know what else people really want, because I think I'm putting out good stuff and listenable stuff, but for some reason it's not necessarily reaching people.
It will.
Yeah, so it'll happen. I know it will happen. It's just quite slow. Whereas I see some people just skyrocket, like instantly, and I'm like, but
yeah, I know.
Not being jealous is an important part of life.
I know where you're coming from. Like I know so many people around me that are doing way better than me, and it can be frustrating at times. But I guess you just have to pay attention to your own trajectory and focus in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a trajectory. That's it. Like, it's not a click of the fingers. You've got to slow down. I'm very impatient as a person, so it's quite hard for me to be like, it'll happen, maybe next week, and it's probably next year, I don't know, maybe the year after, but I'm certainly not slowing down. I've got I was writing down some things. I'm not going to give away too much, but this is my list of things that I want to do, and it's sort of, I've been doing a series, although I haven't done it recently because I've been really busy, of lyrics that have been very important to me. So I did a Muse song, and I'm going to do something that I played at a funeral for someone, but I'm taking my time with that because it is emotionally quite tough. So I put out Fix You. I did another version of it, and I still cried my eyes out playing it because there's some very strong memories associated with it. And I think that's a painful yet beautiful thing about music, is that it can really take you to a place or a memory, or elevate you. It has all these powers that are just, to me, kind of inexplicable. And I think that that's pretty cool, and that we both have that within us, that we can listen to music and it can do that. I think that's a gift.
Well, I want to say a massive thank you for agreeing to be on the show, Lydia. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been fun.
Thank you. And for everyone listening to the Christian Reeve Podcast, thank you very much for listening.
Can I share my social?
Yes, please. Yeah, sure.
So it's just Lydia P. So LYDIA P music. That's it. You'll find me on Instagram and TikTok. I just forgot the word. TikTok, the clock one. And now I'm going to let Christian do a sign off because I interrupted him.
deeply offended by that.
I am so sorry. Oh, I said sorry. I apologized. Oh, for God's sake.
Yeah, everyone
genuinely sorry though.
Everyone make sure to go out of your way to drop Lydia a follow and go support her work. And thank you very much for listening to the Christian Reeve podcast. And until next time, be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.